There, some lay a bag of coffee sitting somewhere in your kitchen right now. Maybe it. Some lay counter. Maybe it. Some lay tucked away in a cabinet beside the mugs they used for years. Either way, it's probably a coffee they bought so many times that you no longer think about it. You know exactly which one Vera Bob, a mug's talking about. It's the coffee you reach for early in the morning before you fully awake. The one you scoop into the coffee maker almost on autopilot. The one that becomes such a familiar part of your daily routine that the label barely registers anymore. You don to study it. You don to compare it. You simply replace it when it's gone. And then you do the same thing again the next week. And the week after that. For many people, that cycle continues for years, sometimes even decades. But here's an interesting question. When was the last time you actually stopped and asked yourself whether that coffee is still the best choice for you? Most people never do. Coffee occupies a unique place in American life. For millions of adults, it's more than a beverage. It's part of the rhythm of the day. It takes often the first thing that enters the body every morning. Before breakfast. Before medication. Before the newspaper. Before the day truly begins. A cup at breakfast. Another cup mid-morning. Maybe another after lunch. And for some people, one more in the afternoon. Over time, those cups add up to thousands upon thousands of servings. Yet despite drinking so much of it, most consumers know surprisingly little about what separates one coffee from another. They know whether they prefer dark roast or medium roast. They know which brands they've seen for years. They know which products are on sale. But beyond that, many people couldn't tell you where their coffee comes from, how it was sourced, how long it's been sitting in the supply chain, or whether the beans inside the bag are actually high quality. And that's where things get interesting, because the coffee industry has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. What many consumers don't realize is that today's coffee market is essentially divided into two very different worlds. On one side are companies that focus heavily on quality. These roasters pay close attention to where their beans are grown. They build relationships with farms and cooperatives. They care about harvest timing, processing methods, freshness, and roasting techniques. Their goal is to showcase the natural qualities of the bean itself. On the other side are brands that operate on a completely different model. Their focus is volume. Their focus is consistency. Their focus is keeping costs low and products moving through massive distribution systems. In that world, coffee is often treated as a commodity rather than a carefully sourced agricultural product. The difference between those two approaches may not seem important when you're standing in the grocery aisle. After all, coffee is coffee, right? Not exactly. Because what's happening behind the scenes can have a significant impact on flavor, freshness, and overall quality. And for adults over 60, that's worth paying attention to. Research over the years has linked coffee consumption with a variety of potential health benefits, particularly when it comes to cognitive function, cardiovascular health, and healthy aging. Much of that interest centers around naturally occurring compounds found in coffee beans, including polyphenols and antioxidants. But not all coffee reaches your cup in the same condition. The way coffee is grown, stored, transported, and roasted can influence what ultimately ends up in your mug each morning. In other words, the bag you grab without thinking may not be delivering what you assume it is. And some of the most heavily advertised brands in America may not necessarily be the best options available today. That's what we're going to coffee brands that consistently stand out for quality, sourcing standards, freshness, and overall value. Some are specialty roasters. Some are easier to find in grocery stores. A few may already be familiar to you. And before we finished, we also discussed 3 extremely popular brands that many consumers continue buying out of habit, even though there may be better alternatives sitting just a few feet away on the same shelf. One of those brands, in particular, surprises a lot of people, so stay with me until the end. Let's start with a company that helped redefine what specialty coffee could be in the United States. Stumptown Coffee Roasters. Number 1. Stumptown Coffee Roasters. If you've spent any time exploring specialty coffee over the last 2 decades, there's It's a good chance you've come across the name Stumptown. Founded in Portland, Oregon in the late 1990s, Stumptown helped introduce many American consumers to a very different way of thinking about coffee. Before companies like Stumptown became popular, most coffee shoppers focused on brands, prices, and roast levels. Stumptown shifted the conversation. Instead of asking, "What brand is this?" they encouraged people to ask, "Where did these beans come from?" That may sound like a small distinction, but it's actually a major one. Because coffee, much like wine, reflects the environment where it's seen grown. Altitude, climate, soil conditions, and processing methods can all influence the final flavor in the cup. For years, most commodity coffee brands treated those differences as unimportant. Beans from different regions were blended together in massive quantities, making it nearly impossible for consumers to know what they were actually drinking. Stumptown took a different path. The company became known for developing direct relationships with farms and cooperatives, rather than relying exclusively on large commodity markets. That approach provided greater transparency and allowed the company to focus on quality at the source rather than trying to fix problems later during roasting. And so where another important difference appears. Many mass-market coffees are roasted extremely dark. The reason ISNT always flavor. In many cases, darker roasting helps create consistency by masking imperfections in lower-quality beans. When everything tastes heavily roasted, it's harder to notice what's underneath. Stumptown generally takes the opposite approach. Their roasting style aims to preserve the unique characteristics of the beans rather than cover them up. The result is often a cup that feels brighter, cleaner, and more complex than what many people are accustomed to from traditional grocery store coffee. Now, if you've been drinking the same mainstream brand for 30 or 40 years, that first cup might actually surprise you. Not because it's stronger, not because it contains more caffeine, but because it tastes different. Many people don't realize how much of what they associate with coffee flavor is actually the flavor of dark roasting rather than the flavor of the coffee bean itself. That's one reason Stumptown has maintained such a loyal following. Among its offerings, Hairbender remains the company's most recognizable blend and has been a customer favorite for more than 20 years. What makes it stand out? ISNT, it's flashy. It's consistency. Year after year, it delivers a balanced cup that introduces consumers to specialty coffee without feeling intimidating or overly complicated. Another detail worth appreciating is freshness. Unlike many conventional brands that rely primarily on best-by dates, Stumptown includes roast dates on its packaging. That may seem like a small detail, but it tells you something important. Freshly roasted coffee gradually loses aroma and flavor over time. Knowing when the coffee was roasted gives consumers a much clearer picture of what 60 who enjoys coffee as part of a daily wellness routine. Freshness can have a meaningful impact on the overall experience. At the end of the day, Stumptown succeeds because it focuses on fundamentals: quality sourcing, thoughtful roasting, transparency, freshness. None of those things make for flashy advertising campaigns, but they make a noticeable difference once the coffee reaches your cup. And that's why, after more than 2 decades, Stumptown remains one of the most respected names in American specialty coffee. But if Stumptown helped introduce many Americans to specialty coffee, the next brand took transparency to an entirely different level. Number 2, counterculture coffee. If Stumptown helped introduce consumers to specialty coffee, counterculture helped raise the standard for accountability. Founded in Durham, North Carolina, in 1995, Counterculture has spent decades building a reputation around one simple idea: if a company claims its coffee is ethically sourced and high quality, it should be able to prove it. That may sound obvious, but in the coffee industry, transparency has historically been the exception rather than the rule. Many coffee companies make broad claims about sustainability, fair treatment of farmers, or premium sourcing. Yet when consumers try to learn exactly where the coffee came from, how much farmers were paid, or what standards were used to evaluate quality, the answers often become surprisingly vague. Counterculture chose a different path. The company became one of the first major American specialty roasters to openly publish detailed information about its sourcing practices. Through annual transparency reports, it provides insight into the regions where coffee is purchased, the quality standards applied, and the prices paid throughout the supply chain. For consumers, that level of openness matters, because trust shouldn't come solely from marketing, it should come from evidence. And counterculture has built much of its reputation by giving customers access to information that many competitors still prefer to keep behind closed doors. But transparency alone doesn't make great coffee. What ultimately matters is what ends up in the cup. And this is where counterculture continues to stand out. The company's roasting philosophy focuses on preserving the natural characteristics of the coffee rather than overwhelming them with heavy roasting. If you reused to traditional supermarket coffee, you may notice something immediately. The flavors often feel cleaner. The aromas feel more distinct. And the bitterness that many people assume is a normal part of coffee tends to be much less dominant. Instead, different coffees reveal different personalities. Some may offer subtle chocolate notes. Others may bring hints of citrus, nuts, caramel, or fruit. These aren't artificial flavors. They naturally occurring characteristics that become noticeable when quality beans are roasted with precision. One of the reasons many people become interested in specialty coffee is because they discover that coffee can actually taste far more complex than they ever imagined. Counterculture is one of the brands that consistently delivers that experience. For newcomers, blends like Big Trouble and Hologram are often recommended starting points. They provide an approachable introduction to specialty coffee without requiring a dramatic change in taste preferences. They rebalanced, they reliable, and they showcase what careful sourcing and roasting can achieve. Now, for adults over 60 who have spent decades drinking the same commodity coffee, the difference can be surprisingly noticeable. Not because the coffee is stronger, not because it's more expensive, but because it feels more intentional. Every step, from farm selection to roasting and packaging, reflects a level of care that isn't always present in mass. What separates companies like Counterculture from many mainstream competitors. They not simply selling caffeine. They reselling a product whose origin, quality, and freshness actually matter. In a marketplace filled with bold claims and attractive packaging, Counterculture has built its reputation by focusing on something much harder to manufacture: credibility. And after more than 30 years in business, that credibility continues to make it one of the most respected names in specialty coffee. But the next company on our list didn't just embrace direct relationships with farmers. Number 3. Intelligentsia Coffee. Long before specialty coffee became a mainstream trend, Intelligentsia was already helping reshape the industry. Founded in Chicago in 1995, the company emerged during a period when most Americans still viewed coffee as a simple commodity. For many consumers, coffee was something you grabbed off a grocery shelf, without giving much thought to where it came from or how it was produced. Intelligentsia challenged that mindset. The company believed coffee should be treated with the same level of respect given to fine wine or high-quality tea. That philosophy influenced nearly every decision it made. From sourcing and roasting to education and quality control, the goal was always the same: help consumers understand that not all coffee is created equal. One of the reasons Intelligentsia became so influential is its commitment to direct trade. Rather than relying heavily on traditional commodity markets, the company built relationships directly with coffee producers around the world. Its buyers regularly traveled to coffee growing regions, meeting farmers face to face, evaluating crops firsthand, and selecting coffees based on strict quality standards. This approach created benefits on both sides of the relationship. Farmers who produced exceptional coffee could earn significantly higher prices. Consumers gained access to coffees whose origins and quality standards were clearly defined. And unlike many marketing claims in the food industry, these relationships were not hidden behind vague language or generic promises. The company built its reputation on knowing exactly where its coffee came from. That attention to detail shows up in the cup. One of Intelligentsia's most recognized products is the Black Cat Classic Espresso. For years, it has been considered one of the benchmark espresso blends in American specialty coffee. The reason isn't hype. It's consistency. Maintaining quality year after year in coffee is far more difficult than many people realize. Harvest conditions change. Weather patterns shift. Growing regions face new challenges. Yet the best specialty roasters find ways to preserve quality while adapting to those realities. Intelligentsia has done that remarkably well. Beyond its signature blends, the company is also known for rotating seasonal single origin coffees. That may sound like a small detail, but it's actually a sign of a company that prioritizes freshness and quality. Coffee is an agricultural product. Like fruits and vegetables, it has harvest cycles. The best coffees aren't necessarily available year-round. By adjusting offerings throughout the year, Intelligentsia focuses on serving coffees when they at their peak rather than forcing the same products onto shelves regardless of quality. That's how coffee ideally should be sold, yet surprisingly few large brands operate this way. Another area where Intelligentsia stands out is freshness. If you've ever purchased a bag of coffee and wondered how long it sat in a warehouse before reaching your kitchen, you're not alone. Many mainstream brands make it difficult to know. Intelligentsia takes a more transparent approach. Roast dates are clearly displayed, allowing consumers to make packaging designed to protect freshness without trapping unwanted gases that naturally develop after roasting. These details may seem technical, but they contribute to something every coffee drinker notices: flavor. Fresh coffee simply tastes better. The aromas are more vibrant, the flavors are more distinct, and the overall experience becomes more enjoyable. For adults over 60, that difference can be especially meaningful. Many people at this stage of life begin paying closer attention to the quality of everyday habits, not because they're chasing trends, but because they recognize that daily routines deserve thoughtful choices. The morning cup of coffee is one of those routines. And when that cup is made with carefully sourced, freshly roasted beans, the experience often feels noticeably different. That's why Intelligentsia remains one of the most respected names in specialty coffee. Not because it's the loudest brand, not because it's the most widely advertised, but because it consistently delivers on the principles that serious coffee drinkers value most: quality, transparency, freshness, and respect for the people who grow the coffee in the first place. But while Intelligentsia helped define direct trade and specialty sourcing, the next company on our list took a different path to earning trust. And it became the first coffee company in the United States to achieve a distinction that very few businesses of any kind can claim. Let's take a closer look at Equator Coffees. Number 4. Equator Coffees. Some coffee companies build their reputation around flavor. Others focus on sourcing. Others emphasize sustainability. Equator Coffees has spent nearly 3 decades proving that it is possible to take all of those priorities seriously at the same time. Founded in California in 1995, Equator began as a small roasting company with a mission that was somewhat unusual for the coffee industry at the time. The goal wasn't simply to sell great coffee. The goal was to build a business that created positive outcomes throughout the entire supply chain. That may sound like a marketing slogan today, but when Equator first began pursuing that vision, very few coffee companies were talking about transparency, sustainability, or social responsibility in the way consumers have become accustomed to hearing now. In fact, Equator eventually became the first coffee company in the United States to achieve B Corporation certification, a designation awarded to businesses that meet rigorous standards for social and environmental responsibility. What's important is that the certification was, in fact, treated as a publicity stunt. It reflected values the company had already been building into its operations for years. One area where that commitment becomes especially visible is sourcing. Equator has consistently worked to build long-term relationships with coffee producers rather than treating farms as interchangeable suppliers. The company has also highlighted partnerships with women-led farms and producer groups, helping bring visibility to individuals who are often overlooked in discussions about the global coffee industry. For many consumers, coffee begins and ends at the grocery store shelf, but every bag represents years of work by farmers, harvest workers, processors, exporters, roasters, and countless others throughout the supply chain. Companies like Equator make that reality easier to see, and when consumers understand where their coffee comes from, they often begin making different purchasing decisions. Of course, none of that matters if the coffee itself isn't good. Fortunately, that's another area where Equator performs exceptionally well. The company generally favors medium roast profiles that allow the natural characteristics of the coffee dominant flavor through aggressive roasting, Ecuador focuses on highlighting what makes each coffee unique. That means you can often taste meaningful differences from one origin to another. A coffee from Colombia may present itself differently than one from Ethiopia. A coffee from Guatemala may reveal characteristics that don't appear in beans grown elsewhere. Those distinctions are part of what makes specialty coffee so fascinating. We're not simply drinking caffeine. Re-experiencing the result of geography, climate, farming practices, and craftsmanship. Ecuador understands that, and instead of hiding those differences, the company embraces them. Another detail worth noting is how seriously Ecuador takes freshness. This is an area many consumers underestimate. Coffee doesn't suddenly become bad overnight, but it does gradually lose many of the aromatic compounds that make it enjoyable. The longer roasted beans sit in storage, the more those characteristics fade. Think of it like fresh bread. Technically, it's still bread after several days, but the same experience. Coffee works much the same way. One reason Ecuador has maintained such strong quality standards is its focus on purchasing coffees according to harvest cycles, rather than trying to force year-round uniformity. Fresh crops replace older crops as seasons change. The result is coffee that arrives closer to its peak condition, and that, something experienced coffee drinkers can often detect immediately. For adults over 60, this attention to freshness can be particularly rewarding. Many people discover that as they age, they appreciate quality over quantity more than they once did. The goal is no longer simply getting through the morning. The goal is enjoying the experience. A better cup of coffee may seem like a small thing, but small daily pleasures add up over time. And when a company consistently delivers quality, transparency, and responsible sourcing, those small improvements become easier to appreciate. That's why Ecuador continues to earn respect among specialty coffee enthusiasts. It doesn't rely on flashy branding. It doesn't dominate television advertising. Instead, it quietly focuses on doing the fundamentals exceptionally well. And sometimes, that's exactly what makes a company worth paying attention to. But the next brand on our list takes a very different approach. Its packaging is bold, its marketing is impossible to miss, and its name alone promises something many coffee drinkers think they need more of. Let's talk about Death Wish Coffee. Number 5, Death Wish Coffee. Let's be honest. Few coffee brands have a name that attracts attention quite like Death Wish Coffee. The black packaging, the skull logo, the bold promise of extreme caffeine. Everything about the brand is designed to stand out. And it works. Even people who have never tried the coffee usually recognize the name. But here's the interesting part. Once you look beyond the marketing, you find a company that is actually doing several things right. In fact, many people are surprised to learn that Death Wish is far more than a caffeine gimmick. The brand was founded with a simple goal: create a coffee that delivers a stronger caffeine kick than most conventional options, while maintaining quality standards that serious coffee drinkers can respect. That's a difficult balance to achieve, because in many cases, products marketed around strength tend to sacrifice quality. Death Wish has largely avoided that trap. One reason is its commitment to certified organic and fair trade coffee. The company has maintained those standards for years, which helps distinguish it from many competitors whose focus is purely on caffeine content. For consumers who care about how coffee is grown, after all, strength means very little if the underlying product isn't something you feel good about drinking every day. So how does Death Wish achieve its reputation for higher caffeine? The answer comes down to the blend. Unlike many specialty coffees that rely almost entirely on Arabica beans, Death Wish incorporates both Arabica and Robusta varieties. If you're unfamiliar with Robusta, it's naturally higher in caffeine than Arabica. That's one reason it's commonly used in espresso blends throughout parts of Europe and Asia. When combined properly, the result can be a coffee that delivers noticeably more stimulation without requiring larger servings. Now, before anyone rushes out to buy the strongest coffee they can find, it's worth remembering something important. More caffeine, automatically better. Especially for older adults. Everyone responds differently to caffeine. Some people can drink coffee late in the afternoon and sleep perfectly well. Others notice sleep disturbances from a single cup consumed before noon. The key is understanding your own tolerance and choosing accordingly. That said, there are certainly consumers who feel that traditional coffee doesn't provide the same effect it once did. After years or even decades of daily consumption, some degree of caffeine tolerance naturally develops. For those individuals, Death Wish offers an option that can feel more satisfying without requiring multiple extra cups throughout the day. And, surprisingly, the flavor is better than many people expect. Given the aggressive branding, some consumers assume the coffee will taste harsh, burnt, or unpleasantly bitter. In reality, the roasting is generally quite consistent. The flavor profile leans dark and bold, but it avoids many of the unpleasant characteristics associated with lower-quality dark roasts. That's an important distinction. Dark roast doesn't automatically mean bad coffee. The problem arises when dark roasting is used to hide defects in poor quality beans. Death Wish starts with better raw materials than many consumers realize. As a result, the coffee maintains a richer and more balanced profile than its branding might suggest. Another positive detail is freshness. Like many respected specialty roasters, the company provides roast date information, helping consumers understand how recently the coffee was produced. That transparency may not seem exciting, but it's one of the easiest ways to identify companies that take coffee quality seriously. Ultimately, Death Wish occupies a unique position in the market. It's not trying to compete with delicate, fruit-forward specialty coffees. It's not trying to be a traditional Italian espresso brand. And it's certainly not trying to blend into the grocery store shelf. Instead, it serves a specific audience. People who enjoy bold coffee, appreciate higher caffeine content, and still want the reassurance of organic and fair trade certifications. For the right consumer, that's a combination that's surprisingly difficult to find. But if Death Wish represents one of the more unconventional choices on this list, the next brand represents something entirely different. It's familiar, widely available, and chances are you've already seen it in your local grocery store. Let's take a closer look at Peet's Coffee and the blend that helped make it famous, Major Dickason's blend. Number 6. Peet's Coffee Major Dickason's blend. Now let's talk about a brand that occupies a very unusual position in the coffee world. Because unlike many of the specialty roasters we've discussed so far, Peet's Coffee isn't difficult to find. You don't need to order it online. You don't need to visit a specialty coffee shop. In many parts of the country, sitting right there on the Peet's has managed to maintain standards that often place it well above many of its mainstream competitors. That's not an accident. The story begins with a man named Alfred Peet. Long before specialty coffee became a movement in America, Peet was introducing consumers to a very different idea of what coffee could be. In the 1960s, most American coffee was relatively mild, heavily processed, and designed for mass appeal. Peet believed coffee could offer much more. Drawing inspiration from European coffee traditions, he focused on higher quality beans and more carefully developed roasting methods. His influence became so significant that many of the people who later helped build America's specialty coffee industry learned directly from him or were inspired by his work. In many ways, Peet helped lay the foundation for the coffee culture Americans know today. And decades later, that legacy remains visible in the company. Strux. Among them, none is more recognizable than Major Dickason's blend. If you've spent time around coffee enthusiasts, you've probably heard the name before. The blend has been Peet's flagship offering for years and remains one of the most respected dark roasts available in mainstream retail channels. What makes it stand out is balance. Many dark roasts fall into one of two extremes. They either so aggressively roasted that every cup tastes burnt, or they so mild that they lose the rich character people expect from a dark roast. Major Dickason's blend manages to avoid both problems. It delivers the depth and body that dark roast lovers enjoy while maintaining a smoother, more refined flavor profile. The result is a coffee that feels substantial without becoming overwhelming. That Major Des one reason it has remained popular for so long. Consistency is another. One challenge facing large coffee companies is maintaining quality across enormous production volumes. As businesses grow, standards often slip. Pete S. has generally done a better job than many competitors at preserving the characteristics that built its reputation in the first place. The company continues to rely primarily on high-quality Arabica beans, and its sourcing practices are more transparent than those of many mainstream brands sitting beside it on the shelf. Now, is Pete S. as fresh as coffee roasted by a small local specialty roaster just a few days earlier? Usually not. That is simply the reality of national distribution. When products are shipped across the country and stocked in thousands of stores, some compromise in freshness is inevitable. But here is the important point. Within those constraints, Pete S. consistently performs well. In fact, many coffee experts consider it one of the best options available for consumers who want an upgrade from traditional commodity coffee without dramatically changing their shopping habits. And that matters, because not everyone wants to order coffee online, not everyone wants to research dozens of specialty roasters, and not everyone wants to pay premium prices for every bag they purchase. Sometimes people simply want a reliable coffee that, ace, easy to find, and noticeably better than the alternatives surrounding it. Pete S. fills that role exceptionally well. For adults over 60, that accessibility can be especially appealing. You don't have to change your routine. You don't have to learn new brewing methods. You don't have to hunt down a specialty retailer. You can simply pick up a bag during your normal grocery trip and enjoy a better cup the next morning. And sometimes the best improvement is the one that's easiest to make. See how it has allowed Pete that to remain relevant for more than half a century. It combines quality, consistency, and convenience in a way few coffee brands have managed mainstream and specialty coffee. The next company on our list sits comfortably in the middle of that space. It's a brand that has spent decades proving that an upgrade doesn't have to feel complicated. Let's talk about La Colombe and its famous Corsica blend. Number 7. La Colombe Corsica blend. Some coffee brands try to impress you with complexity, others compete on price. La Colombe built its reputation on something much simpler: consistency. Founded in Philadelphia in 1994, La Colombe has spent more than 30 years establishing itself as one of the most dependable names in American specialty coffee. While trends have come and gone, the company has remained focused on delivering approachable, high-quality coffee that doesn't require consumers to become experts in order to enjoy it. And that's a big reason why so many people continue returning to the brand year after year. Coffee enthusiasts often enjoy discussing tasting notes, processing methods, and regional characteristics. There's nothing wrong with that. But for most people, the question is much simpler. Does it taste good? And can I count on it to taste good every morning? La Colombe has built its success by answering both questions with a confident yes. Among all of its offerings, none is more closely associated with the company than Corsica Blend. For many coffee drinkers, Corsica serves as their introduction to specialty coffee. Not because it's trendy, not because it's expensive, but because it strikes a balance that can be surprisingly difficult to find. The blend delivers the rich, satisfying body that dark roast drinkers enjoy, while avoiding the harsh bitterness that often comes with lower-quality dark coffees. That's an important distinction. Many consumers assume dark coffee is supposed to taste burnt. In reality, that's often a sign of poor roasting or lower-quality beans. A well-executed dark roast should feel bold and rich without overwhelming the palate. Corsica achieves that balance remarkably well. It's full-bodied, it's smooth, and it remains approachable even for people who have spent decades drinking traditional grocery store coffee. Another reason La Colombe has earned such a loyal following is its commitment to sourcing. The company works with carefully selected suppliers and maintains standards that place it firmly above the commodity coffee category. The beans are high-quality Arabica. The sourcing practices are documented, and the company places significant emphasis on maintaining consistency across every batch. That consistency matters more than many people realize. Anyone can produce one excellent batch of coffee. Producing excellent coffee year after year is much harder. It requires discipline, quality control, and a willingness to prioritize long-term reputation over short-term cost savings. La Colombe has demonstrated that commitment for decades. Freshness is another area where the company performs well. The packaging includes meaningful information that helps consumers understand what they rebuying, and the company takes steps to preserve quality throughout distribution. While no nationally distributed coffee can match the freshness of beans roasted yesterday at a local roastery, La Colombe consistently delivers a product that tastes vibrant and well cared for. And for many consumers, that's exactly the sweet spot. Not bargain, basement coffee. Not ultra, premium luxury coffee. Just genuinely good coffee at a price that feels reasonable. For adults over 60, that balance can be particularly appealing. At this stage of life, many people are in party looking for the newest trend. They're looking for reliability. They want products that consistently deliver value without requiring unnecessary effort or expense. La Colombe fits that description exceptionally well. It's an upgrade that doesn't a better version feel like of something many people already enjoy every day. And sometimes those are the most meaningful improvements of all. Because when a daily habit becomes a little more enjoyable, the benefit accumulates over time. That's why La Colombe continues to stand out in an increasingly crowded coffee market. It doesn't promise miracles. It doesn't rely on flashy marketing. It simply delivers a consistently good cup of coffee, day after day. And that's a promise many consumers appreciate. But the next brand on our list takes a very different approach. It doesn't come from the specialty coffee world. It doesn't carry a premium price tag. And yet it has earned a place in millions of households for generations. Let's talk about Café Bustelo. Number 8. Café Bustelo. Now let's talk about a brand that proves something important. Good coffee doesn't always have to be expensive. In fact, some of the most enjoyable coffees on the market come from companies that understand how to deliver character and flavor without asking consumers to pay specialty roaster prices. Café Bustelo is one of those brands. For generations, the bright yellow packaging has been a familiar sight in homes across the United States, particularly within Hispanic and Latino communities, where strong coffee has long been an important part of daily life. Unlike many brands that have spent decades reinventing themselves through marketing campaigns, Café Bustelo has remained remarkably consistent. It knows exactly what it is, and it knows exactly who it's for. The brand was built around the tradition of bold, espresso-style coffee. Not necessarily espresso prepared on expensive machines, but coffee that delivers a richer, stronger, more concentrated flavor experience than the average American drip coffee. That's one reason so many loyal customers continue buying it year after year. It doesn't try to be everything to everyone. Instead, it focuses on doing one thing exceptionally well, delivering a strong, satisfying cup at an affordable price. Now, to be clear, Café Bustelo doesn't operate according to the same sourcing standards as some of the specialty roasters we've discussed earlier. You're not getting the same level of origin transparency that you might find with companies like Stumptown, Counterculture, or Intelligentsia. But that's not really the comparison most consumers should be making. The more relevant question is this: how does Café Bustelo compare with other coffees in its price range? And that's where the brand performs surprisingly well. For the cost, it delivers a level of flavor and personality that many competitors struggle to match. The roast is dark. The body is substantial, and the coffee has enough intensity to stand up well to milk, cream, and traditional espresso-style preparations. Many budget coffees end up tasting thin or flat. Café Bustelo generally avoids that problem. Instead, it produces a cup that feels intentional. A cup with character. A cup that reminds you coffee can still be enjoyable even when you're not spending premium prices. Another advantage is accessibility. You can find it almost anywhere. Large grocery stores, warehouse clubs, neighborhood markets, online retailers. That convenience makes it an easy upgrade for consumers who want something better than the lowest tier of commodity coffee, but aren't quite ready to explore the specialty coffee world. And honestly, that's where many people find themselves. Not everyone wants to analyze tasting notes. Not everyone wants to compare harvest seasons. Most people simply want a coffee they enjoy drinking every morning. Café Bustelo understands that reality. The company has never tried to position itself as a luxury product. Instead, it has built trust by consistently delivering value. For adults over 60 that in households where practicality mattered. You looked for quality. But you also looked for value. Products earned loyalty because they performed well, not because they came with elaborate branding. Café Bustelo reflects that tradition. It offers a coffee experience that feels richer and more flavorful than many similarly priced competitors while remaining accessible to almost everyone. And perhaps that the brand, greatest strength. It doesn't promise perfection. It simply offers more than people expect. And in today's coffee market, that often enough to earn a place in the kitchen. But if Café Bustelo demonstrates what possible at the affordable end of the market, the next brand takes us in a very different direction. We heading to Italy. And we talking about a company that's been refining coffee for more than a century. Let's take a closer look at Lavazza Super Crema. Number 9. Lavazza Super Crema. Some coffee companies have been around for decades. Lavazza has been around for more than a century. Founded in Turin, Italy in 1895, the company has become one of the most recognizable names in coffee worldwide. While trends, technologies, and consumer preferences have changed dramatically over the years, Lavazza has remained closely connected to one thing: Italian coffee tradition. And when most people think of Italian coffee, they think of espresso, rich aroma, balanced flavor, a smooth finish, and that thin golden layer of crema sitting on top of a properly prepared shot. Creating that experience consistently is harder than it looks. Yet that's exactly what Lavazza has spent generations refining. Among its many offerings, Super Crema remains one of the company's most popular and respected blends. And the name ISNT, just marketing. The blend was specifically designed to produce the creamy texture and balanced flavor profile that espresso drinkers look for. For anyone who owns a home espresso machine, a mocha pot, or even an espresso-capable automatic brewer, Super Crema is often one of the easiest recommendations to make. Why? Because it's remarkably forgiving. Some specialty coffees require very precise brewing techniques to achieve their best results. A small adjustment in grind size or brewing time can dramatically change the flavor. Lavazza Super Crema tends to be more approachable. It performs well across a wide range of brewing methods and skill levels. That consistency has helped make it a favorite among both beginners and experienced coffee drinkers. The blend itself combines Arabica and Robusta beans sourced from multiple regions. Now, some coffee enthusiasts hear the word Robusta and immediately become skeptical, but context matters. Robusta ISNT automatically a negative. In fact, many traditional Italian espresso blends incorporate Robusta intentionally. When used correctly, it can contribute body, crema, and a pleasant richness that complements the sweeter characteristics of Arabica beans. Lavazza has had more than enough time to learn how to strike that balance. The result is a coffee that feels smooth, approachable, and distinctly European in character. Another advantage is acidity. Many American coffees, particularly lighter roasts, can taste somewhat bright or acidic to certain consumers. Some people enjoy that. Others don't. Super Crema generally leans toward a gentler profile. The flavor tends to feel rounder and more balanced, making it appealing to people who prefer a smoother cup. For adults over 60, that can be especially attractive. Many viewers aren't necessarily looking for experimental flavors. They looking for comfort. They looking for consistency. They looking for a coffee that feels pleasant and familiar every morning. The company has also invested heavily in sustainability and long-term producer relationships through various initiatives and programs over the years. While it operates on a much larger scale than most specialty roasters, it has continued to recognize that quality begins at the farm level. And that, one reason Lavazza has managed to maintain its reputation across generations. Perhaps the most impressive thing about Super Crema is its accessibility. You don't need to spend a fortune. You don't need to join a subscription service. You don't need to hunt down a specialty retailer. You can often find it at a reasonable price while still enjoying a coffee experience that feels distinctly different from many mainstream grocery store alternatives. That's a rare combination. A century of expertise, reliable quality, broad availability, and a flavor profile that continues to satisfy coffee drinkers around the world. It's easy to see why so many people remain loyal to the brand. But before we move into the coffees, you may want to think twice about buying their one final coffee worth highlighting. It's organic. It's fair trade certified. And for many consumers, it represents one of the best values in specialty coffee today. Let's talk about Kicking Horse Coffee and its famous Kick-Ass Dark Roast. Number 10. Kicking Horse Coffee Kick-Ass Dark Roast. By now you've probably noticed a pattern. Many of the best coffee brands on this list share certain qualities. They care about sourcing, they pay attention to freshness, and they focus on delivering a product that's actually enjoyable to drink, rather than simply recognizable on a store shelf. Kicking Horse Coffee is another excellent example. Founded in British Columbia, Canada, the company has spent more than 2 decades building a reputation around quality, sustainability, and consistency. Unlike some brands that introduce organic products as a secondary offering, Kicking Horse built its identity around that commitment from the beginning. Every coffee in its lineup is certified organic. Every coffee is fair trade certified. And those standards have remained central to the company's philosophy as it has grown. That's worth paying attention to, because as companies become larger, maintaining strict standards often becomes more difficult. Yet Kicking Horse has managed to expand while continuing to emphasize the values that helped establish its reputation in the first place. Among all of its offerings, none is more recognizable than Kick-Ass Dark Roast. And yes, the name certainly gets people's attention. But unlike some products that rely heavily on marketing, this coffee has developed a loyal following, because the quality generally lives up to the branding. Dark roasts can be tricky. When they redone well, they deliver richness, depth, and a satisfying full-bodied character. When they redone poorly, they become bitter, burnt, and one-dimensional. The difference often comes down to bean quality and roasting skill. Kicking Horse manages that balance exceptionally well. The coffee is bold without feeling harsh, strong without becoming overwhelming, and flavorful without relying on excessive roasting to create character. That's one reason so many dark roast enthusiasts continue recommending it. The company starts with quality beans. Then it roasts them carefully enough to preserve what makes them enjoyable in the first place. The result is a coffee that feels substantial but still maintains complexity. Another reason Kicking Horse stands out is transparency. The company provides meaningful information about its products and continues to emphasize sourcing standards that consumers can actually verify. In today's marketplace, that's increasingly valuable. Many brands talk about sustainability. Many brands talk about ethical sourcing. Far fewer are willing to make those commitments a consistent part. And for consumers who care about what they're putting into their bodies every day, that provides an added level of confidence. Now let's talk about value, because this is where Kicking Horse becomes particularly attractive. The coffee, isn't as inexpensive as traditional commodity brands, but it also doesn't reach the premium prices associated with some of the smallest specialty roasters. Instead, it occupies a middle ground that many consumers find appealing. You receive certified organic coffee, you receive fair trade certification, you receive quality roasting, and you receive broad availability without paying luxury-level prices. That's a combination that can be surprisingly difficult to find. For adults over 60, it may represent one of the most practical upgrades available. You don't have to change your routine. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need specialized knowledge. You simply start with a better coffee. And often, that's enough to noticeably improve the daily experience. Because at the end of the day, coffee isn't just about caffeine. It's about enjoyment. It's about routine. It's about starting the morning with something you genuinely look forward to. Kicking Horse understands that. And that's why it earns the final spot among the coffee brands most worth considering. But now we come to the part of the video that tends to surprise people. Because some of the brands we're about to discuss are household names. They familiar. They trusted. And they occupied kitchen shelves across America for generations. The question is whether that trust is still being earned today. Let us begin with perhaps the most recognizable coffee brand in the country, Folgers Classic Roast. Now let's move to the first coffee on our Think Twice Before Buying list, Folgers Classic Roast. For many Americans, this name needs no introduction. In fact, there's a good chance some viewers watching right now grew up in a household where Folgers was the default coffee. The iconic red container has been part of American kitchens for generations. Parents bought it, grandparents bought it, and many consumers continue buying it today for one simple reason. It's familiar. There's comfort in familiarity. When you use the same product for years, maybe even decades, it begins to feel like the safe choice. You know what to expect. You recognize the packaging instantly. And because it's always been there, you assume it's still one of the better options available. But familiarity and quality aren't always the same thing. And that's where the conversation around Folgers becomes interesting. To understand the issue, we need to look beyond the brand itself and examine what's actually inside the container. Unlike many specialty coffee companies, Folgers operates primarily within the commodity coffee system. That means the company's primary objective is scale, large volumes, consistent production, broad distribution, and competitive pricing. There's nothing inherently wrong with that business model. In fact, it is one reason Folgers became so successful. The challenge is that achieving those goals often requires compromises. Coffee beans are sourced from multiple regions. Supply chains become more complex, and maintaining low prices can become a higher priority than maximizing quality. As a result, traceability tends to be limited. Most consumers have little idea where the beans originated, how recently they were harvested, or what quality standards were applied before they reached the roasting facility. Compare that with many specialty roasters, where individual farms, growing regions, and sourcing relationships are often clearly identified. The difference is substantial. Freshness is another concern. When people see a best by date on a container, many assume they receiving relatively isn't necessarily the case. Pre-ground coffee begins losing aroma and flavor compounds shortly after grinding. And because commodity coffee often moves through extensive distribution networks, it may spend significant time in storage before ever reaching the consumer. By the time it arrives in your kitchen, much of what makes freshly roasted coffee special may already be gone. What remains is consistency. But consistency alone doesn't guarantee quality. And that brings us to flavor. Folgers is designed to produce a taste profile that millions of consumers immediately recognize. The coffee is roasted in a way that creates uniformity from batch to batch. The problem is that much of the bean's natural character disappears in the process. Instead of highlighting origin characteristics, sweetness, complexity, or subtle aromas, the flavor tends to become dominated by the roast itself. One reason many people who transition to higher quality coffee are surprised by what they discover. They suddenly realize that coffee can taste dramatically different from what they've been drinking for years. Not stronger, not necessarily more expensive, just fresher, cleaner, and more interesting. Now, this doesn't mean every cup of Folgers is terrible. Millions of people drink it every day. Millions of people enjoy it. The point isn't that Folgers is undrinkable. The point is that many consumers continue buying it largely out of habit without realizing how many alternatives now exist at surprisingly similar price points. And that's the question worth asking. If coffee is something you consume every single morning, if it's one of the most consistent parts of your daily routine, and if better options are readily available, then is loyalty to a decades-old brand still serving you? Or is it simply serving the brand? That's a question every consumer has to answer for themselves. But once people experience fresher, more carefully sourced coffee, many find it surprisingly difficult to go back. And Folgers isn't the only legacy brand facing that challenge. Because the next coffee on our list has built an equally powerful reputation over the years. Its slogan is one of the most recognizable in advertising history. But the coffee inside may not be living up to the image many consumers still have in mind. Let's talk about Maxwell House Original Roast. Number 2 on the list is Maxwell House Original Roast. And if Folgers represents one half of America's coffee history, Maxwell House represents the other. For more than a century, the brand has been a familiar presence in homes across the country. Its famous slogan, "Good to the last drop," is one of the most successful advertising campaigns ever created. In fact, many consumers recognize the slogan even if they haven't seen a Maxwell House commercial in years. That is the power of a brand built over generations. But here, something worth considering. A strong reputation can sometimes outlive the quality that originally created it. And that's where Maxwell House deserves a closer look. Like Folgers, Maxwell House operates primarily within the commodity coffee market. The focus is scale, large production volumes, national distribution, competitive pricing, and predictable consistency. Again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that approach. The problem is what often gets sacrificed in the process. When coffee is produced at massive scale, sourcing tends to become less transparent. Most consumers have little visibility into where the beans originated or how they were selected. The emphasis shifts away from showcasing the coffee itself and toward maintaining a uniform product that tastes the same year after year. For some buyers, that's exactly what they want. But for consumers interested in quality, it raises important questions. Because coffee different regions produce different flavor characteristics. Different harvests produce different results. And preserving those distinctions is often what separates specialty coffee from commodity coffee. Maxwell House generally moves in the opposite direction. Its roasting process is designed to create familiarity. The result is a flavor profile that many Americans instantly recognize. But recognition isn't necessarily the same thing as quality. In fact, one of the most surprising experiences for longtime Maxwell House drinkers is discovering what properly roasted coffee actually tastes like. Many people have spent decades assuming that coffee is supposed to be bitter, supposed to taste slightly burnt, supposed to have that sharp edge that requires cream and sugar to soften. But much of that expectation comes from years of exposure to commodity coffee. Freshly roasted, carefully sourced coffee often presents a very different experience. It can be smoother, sweeter, more balanced, and far more complex. The first time some people try a high-quality specialty coffee, they immediately love it. Not because it's worse, but because it's unfamiliar. Their palate has been trained to expect something else. That's an important point. Sometimes the products we think we prefer are simply the products they consumed the longest. Habit is powerful, and few industries understand that better than the food and beverage industry. Maxwell House has benefited enormously from that reality. Generations of consumers have continued buying the brand because it's what they always bought. Not necessarily because they compared it against today's alternatives. And that's the real concern. Not that Maxwell House is the worst coffee available, but that many consumers have never given themselves the opportunity to discover how much better coffee can be, especially now that high-quality options are more widely available than ever before. Coffee has evolved dramatically over the last 20 years. Consumers have more choices, more transparency, and better access to quality than previous generations could have imagined. Yet many people continue purchasing the same products they were buying decades ago, not because they were the best option, but because they were familiar. And that's exactly why Maxwell House lands on this list. It represents a coffee category built around consistency and habit rather than freshness, transparency, and quality. The question isn't whether Maxwell House is drinkable. Of course it is. The question is whether it's still deserving of the loyalty it continues to receive. And for many coffee drinkers, the answer may no longer be as obvious as it once was. But there's one more brand we need to discuss. And in some ways, it may be the most surprising entry on this list. Because unlike Folgers and Maxwell House, many consumers already believe it. SA Step Up. Let S take a closer look at 80 Clock Original. Number 3, 80 Clock Original. This is probably the most controversial brand on today's list. Not because it's especially bad, and not because it lacks loyal customers, but because many people view it as the smart alternative to traditional commodity coffee. For years, 80 Clock has occupied an interesting position in the marketplace. It's often perceived as a middle ground option, better than Folgers, better than Maxwell House, yet still affordable and easy to find. And to be fair, there is some truth to that perception. The coffee is made primarily from Arabica beans, which is generally a positive sign. The company also offers whole bean options, giving consumers greater control over freshness and brewing quality. Those are genuine advantages. But they don't tell the whole story. The issue with 80 Clock isn't what it claims to be. The issue is the gap between what many consumers assume they getting and what they sit slightly above the commodity category. It still falls well short of what most specialty roasters deliver. Origin transparency remains limited. Detailed sourcing information is difficult to find. Freshness information is often less comprehensive than what quality-focused roasters provide. And when it comes to flavor, the difference becomes noticeable. Coffee enthusiasts frequently describe specialty coffee as more vibrant, more aromatic, and more expressive. Those qualities don't appear by accident. They result from careful sourcing, careful roasting, and careful handling throughout the supply chain. That's where 80 Clock struggles to compete. The coffee isn't terrible. In fact, many consumers find it perfectly acceptable. The problem is that acceptable isn't the same thing as exceptional. And when consumers are paying a premium compared to traditional commodity brands, expectations naturally rise. For many buyers, 80 Clock feels like an upgrade. The question is how much of an upgrade it really is. Compared with Folgers and Maxwell House? Probably yes. Compared with the best coffees discussed earlier in this video? Not even close. That's an important distinction, because consumers often make purchasing decisions based on relative comparisons. If the only alternatives you reconsidering are low-end commodity brands, 80 Clock may seem impressive. But once you compare it with genuinely high-quality coffee, its limitations become much more apparent. And that's why it earns a place on this list. Not because it's the worst coffee available, but because it benefits from a reputation that may exceed what the product currently delivers. For some consumers, it may still represent a reasonable choice. But for others, it may simply be preventing them from discovering how much better their morning coffee could actually be. And that brings us to the bigger picture. So what should you take away from everything we've discussed today? It's actually quite simple. Coffee is one of the most frequently consumed products in the lives of many older adults. For some people, it's the first thing they drink every morning. For others, it's a daily ritual that's been part of their routine for 30, 40, or even 50 years. And that's exactly why the choice matters. Not because coffee is a miracle food, not because switching brands will suddenly transform your health overnight, but because small daily habits have a way of shaping our lives over time. When something becomes part of your routine every single day, the quality of that choice deserves a little attention. The good news is that improving your coffee doesn't necessarily require spending a fortune. It doesn't require buying expensive equipment. And it certainly doesn't require becoming a coffee expert. In many cases, it simply means becoming a more informed consumer, understanding where your coffee comes from, paying attention to freshness, looking beyond familiar packaging, and recognizing that some of the biggest names on the shelf aren't always the best options available. The brands we highlighted earlier, whether it was Stumptown, Counterculture, Intelligentsia, Equator, Pete, La Colombe, Lavazza, Kicking Horse, or others, share a common characteristic. They place greater emphasis on quality, they place greater emphasis on sourcing, and they place greater emphasis on delivering a product that respects both the coffee and the consumer. On the other hand, some legacy brands continue relying heavily on recognition, familiarity, and decades of accumulated trust. There's nothing wrong with tradition. But tradition should never replace curiosity. Because sometimes the products we've purchased for years are no longer the products we would choose if we were making that decision for the very first time today. And that,
For adults over
especially
60,
true, the
when it
morning
comes to
cup is
coffee.
about more than caffeine. It's about comfort. It's about routine. It's about starting the day on a positive note. And when that daily experience becomes a little better, the benefits can feel surprisingly meaningful. Maybe that means trying a new brand. Maybe it means paying closer attention to roast dates. Maybe it simply means asking questions you never thought to ask before. Whatever approach you choose, the goal, perfection, the goal is awareness. Because the more you understand about the products you consume every day, the better equipped you are to make decisions that align with your preferences, your priorities, and your overall well-being. And that's something worth remembering the next time you reach for a bag of coffee. Before we finish, I'd love to hear from you. What coffee brand are you drinking right now? And is there a favorite coffee that you think deserves to be on this list? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Many viewers discover great recommendations from one another, and your experience may help someone find their next favorite cup. If you found this video helpful, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to the channel. Every like, comment, and subscription helps us continue creating content focused on healthy aging, smarter food choices, and everyday habits that can support wellness after 60. And if you know someone who starts every morning with a cup of coffee, consider sharing this video with them. They may be surprised by what they've been drinking all these years. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Take care of yourself, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video. It helped make direct trade one of the defining ideas of modern specialty coffee. Let's talk about intelligentsia coffee.